What's up guys, just Josh here. Welcome back to the most viewed series on the channel, Album Rankings. Today I'm going to be updating my ranking for Slipknot, which, as you know, I'm sure you guys aren't living under a rock. Slipknot put out a new album this year, We Are Not Your Kind, and I have decided to update my ranking of Slipknot because even aside from We Are Not Your Kind, my list has changed a little bit. And also I'm going to be updating my Korn ranking to include The Nothing, their new album. And I'm going to be updating my Machine Head ranking as well, because that has changed considerably, seeing as how I ranked those albums right after I listened to their discography for the first time. So now that I'm a pretty big Machine Head fan, my ranking has changed quite a lot. But without further ado, let's get into the Slipknot album ranking update. So, my least favorite Slipknot album of all time is Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat. This was actually second to last on my original album ranking, so it's moved down a spot to my least favorite because it's a good album, don't get me wrong. I still love this album. It's just that it really does not feel like the Slipknot we all know and love today. It's sounds at least like an entirely different band, just with the Slipknot name on it, with songs such as Do Nothing, Bitch Slap, which are basically half rap, or no, not half rap, excuse me, half jazz and half metal, which is an interesting combination. It sort of works. But yeah, this is just Slipknot in their infancy. A lot of the original 9 were not in the band at this point. Anders Colsefni was the original vocalist, and then Corey Taylor joined in '97. So, yeah, Anders is really not that great, at least on this album. He's improved a lot since then, but his growls on this album are really good, just his cleans are not there. He's a very bad singer on this album. Obviously, he's gotten a lot better since then. But yeah, this album just doesn't grab me the way that current day Slipknot does, and that's why it's my least favorite. And at number 6, we have All Hope Is Gone, my least favorite Slipknot album of the post-MFKR Slipknot, and my second least favorite Slipknot album overall. Yeah, it's still a good album, don't get me wrong. All Hope Is Gone is a great album. It's just that it feels very disconnected. It feels very discombobulated. It's not really a cohesive album. It more so feels like a collection of songs rather than one cohesive listen. And it feels very disconnected. Band relations were not very good at this point. A lot of band members recorded their tracks separately, and that almost never works on an album. You need to just collaborate. You need to be in the right headspace to make an album. This album was very rushed, and it definitely shows on songs such as Butcher's Hook. Corey Taylor just does not sound like he's into it at all. He sounds very bored with his cleans, especially in the chorus. And yeah, you still got great songs on here, such as Gematria, The Killing Name, and All Hope Is Gone, the title track. Even Psychosocial is a good song, even though it's overplayed as all fuck. And you got ridiculously underrated songs, such as Vendetta and This Cold Black. So it's still a good album, just not as great when you compare it to albums such as Iowa, .5, or even their self-titled Volume 3, just not as good as the rest of their discography, in my opinion. And at number 5, I got Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses. I did not connect with this album at first. In fact, it was my least favorite Slipknot album on my original ranking that I did on my old channel. So yeah, I just did not connect with the experimental style of this album at first, but the more I listened to it, the more I grew to absolutely adore this album. It is 100% amazing. And while it is low in my ranking, you gotta look at the albums that we got coming up that are a bit better than this album. But really, Slipknot really does not have a bad record when you really look at it. But yeah, you got blisteringly heavy tracks such as The Blister Exists, 3-0, and Welcome. Then you also have these songs that are very melodic, as well as heavy, such as Opium of the People, songs like that. And you have not really ballads, but like very slow, soft songs such as Circle and Vermilion Part 2, which just had a very haunting, depressing, very sentimental as well melody on them. Just, yeah, a good album, just not as good as the stuff that we got coming up, in my opinion. And at number 4, we got Slipknot's major label debut album, Slipknot. Their self-titled album has a lot of live staples and just bread and butter Slipknot songs that you can't go without, such as Sick, Eyeless, Wait and Bleed, Surfacing, and Spit It Out. And you also got some really, really underrated deep cuts on this album, such as Prosthetics and Diluted. But yeah, this album is just very classic Slipknot. What really broke them into major success in the late 90s. They were one of the biggest bands in the so-called nu metal era, even though I would not really consider Slipknot a nu metal band. You could call their self-titled album a nu metal album, because it does have a fair amount of rapping on it, but still, they really moved on from the nu metal thing when the time Iowa rolled around. You know, that album just has a lot of death and thrash metal elements. This album does too. It's got more of an extreme metal vibe. But yeah, just a classic Slipknot album. You really can't go without their debut album. And speaking of Iowa, this is going to piss off a lot of Slipknot fans, but it is number 3 now. It was my favorite before, but it kind of fell off because I just really feel that .5 and We Are Not Your Kind, to be honest, are better albums. If you are talking about heavy all the way through, this is, in those terms, Slipknot's heaviest album when you're talking about all the way through, but this album does get a bit one-dimensional at points. Very just straightforward, profanity-littered lyrics, which isn't really a bad thing. It's a great album to listen to when you're pissed off. I know it's a go-to for myself personally. I just throw this album on when I'm really pissed off, and by the time Gently or Left Behind rolls around, I feel better. But yeah, I still love this album. It's still one of Slipknot's best albums, and like I said, all the way through, this is perhaps their heaviest album, or at least one of their heaviest albums. But I'm really not a fan of how people dick ride this album and act like it's Slipknot's magnum opus and everything after it sucked ass. That's not true. That's not true at all. If you think that Slipknot and Iowa are their only good albums, you're not a maggot at all. Just a very great album. Don't get me wrong. It's very heavy, very dark, very just emotional, but it's really not their best album in my opinion. But you still got absolute ragers, absolute rippers on here, such as People Equal Shit, Disaster Piece, even My Plague, even though it's a bit more melodic. Also, Everything Ends, Heretic Anthem. You got very underrated songs such as Skin Ticket and Metabolic, and also the very haunting title track. Amazing album, just very overrated. And my second favorite Slipknot album of all time is .5, The Gray Chapter. Now, a lot of pressure was on Slipknot when they released this album. It was their first album without founding members Joey Jordison and Paul Gray. Let's have a moment of silence for the legend Paul Gray. Rest in peace. So yeah, a lot of people were wondering, how could Slipknot make an album without founding members Joey Jordison and Paul Gray? But they did it. They made one of their best albums to date, and a lot of people shat on this album because apparently it sounded too much like Stone Sour. Well, I don't hear any Stone Sour in Sarcastrophe, or The Negative One, or Lek, or Custer, or songs like that. People need to pull their heads out of their fucking asses and figure out that Slipknot melody does not sound like Stone Sour melody. Yes, they do have Stone Sour-esque songs, such as Snuff. I'll give you that. I'll even give you Dead Memories, but not songs like Goodbye and other melodic songs on this album like that. Just this album is very mature. This album is very diverse, very unique. All their albums are unique, but this one especially. And yeah, I don't hear any Stone Sour in this album. People who say that really don't even realize that Corey was in Stone Sour before he joined Slipknot, and Slipknot has always had melody, even on MFKR, the self-titled album. Those don't sound like Stone Sour, do they? I don't think so. Dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. But anyways, I don't mean to go on a tangent. Let's get back to why this is my second favorite Slipknot album. Like I said, very mature. Lots of thought-provoking lyrics on this album that really take time to dissect before you really understand their meanings. Whereas Iowa just had like straightforward, almost immature lyrics such as, you know, I want to slit your throat and fuck the wound and all that shit. You instantly know what they're talking about on that album, basically. So this album just very diverse lyrics, very mature lyrics. It takes a lot of time to dissect. As I said, very heavy, but also very emotional. Their swan song to Paul Gray. And at number 1, my favorite Slipknot album of all time is their most recent effort, We Are Not Your Kind. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh Josh, it's only been out for a little over a month. How do you know what's your favorite already? Because I do. Simple as that, you know. This album is really Slipknot at their most emotional, at their most vulnerable, and at their darkest. Yes, it's darker than Iowa. I said it. Even 0.5 is darker than Iowa. Iowa is dark, don't get me wrong, but Iowa, when you really look at it, is hatred for the sake of hatred, rage for the sake of rage, and that pales in comparison to the darkness on this album and 0.5. For 0.5, they lost Paul. Way darker than anything on Iowa. And for this, Corey Taylor, at probably his darkest moments, his most self-loathing moments, with the lyrics all about his ex-wife and the betrayal that he went through. This album is really just a burning ball of just rage. You got absolute bangers on here, such as Nero Forte, Red Flag, Orphan, and the colossal Solway Firth, but that doesn't even scratch the surface. You also have anthems, such as Unsainted, Birth of the Cruel, Critical Darling, and you also have some very, very experimental tracks, such as Spiders and My Pain, which really aren't metal per se, but they are very, very unique songs. And you also have some songs that mix crushing heaviness with this very sentimental, depressing melody, such as A Liar's Funeral and Not Long for This World, which really bring up notes of Volume 3. This album is like Volume 3 crossed with Iowa, but on steroids. It's very, very interesting, and most definitely Slipknot's best album, in my opinion. There you have it, guys. That is my updated ranking for Slipknot. Please let me know what your ranking is down in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and peace out. Take care.